Britain's most prestigious stamp concealed a king turned upside down, not in the printed design, but buried within the paper itself. For years, the George V Seahorse stamp passed through wartime post offices undetected. Only 4 mint blocks survive. One sold for 7 figures. How a mistake invisible to the naked eye became a million-dollar rarity begins with a single sheet of paper fed the wrong way. In 1913, British stamp design reached its zenith with the introduction of the George V Seahorse series. These were not the everyday penny stamps tucked into letters, but the crown jewels of the postal system, issued in high denominations like 2 shillings and 6pence, reserved for parcels and valuable correspondence. At their heart stood the king himself, his profile drawn from the 1910 Marlborough portrait, framed above a dynamic tableau. Britannia's chariots surging through rolling waves, seahorses straining at their harnesses. Every detail was rendered by hand in deep intaglio, a printing technique that pressed ink into the paper's very fibers. The result was a stamp with extraordinary depth and subtlety. Seafoam seemed to shimmer, and the king's features held a quiet authority. Contemporary philatelists marveled at the craftsmanship. Reviews in the Great Britain Philatelic Society's journals praised the flawless line work, the precision of the shading, and the richness of the paper chosen by De La Rue, Britain's master engravers. Each plate, catalogued today as SG 405 through 413, was a feat of technical control, demanding perfect alignment and pressure with every sheet. The 2 shillings and 6pence Seahorse, in particular, became the highest value domestic stamp of its day, a key revenue source and a symbol of royal prestige. Senior curators at the British Postal Museum and Archive have called the Seahorse a benchmark of engraved excellence, its design and execution unmatched in British philately. Yet for all its perfection, the stamp's beauty depended on invisible precision. Even the smallest deviation, a paper misalignment, a slip in the feed, could introduce flaws hidden from view, waiting to be discovered by future generations. The stakes for any imperfection were set as high as the standards that created this miniature work of art. Hidden beneath the royal portrait and the swirling seahorses lies a detail so faint, most owners never suspected it was there. The seahorse stamps, like all high-value British issues of the time, were printed on paper embedded with a watermark, a crown and cross, pressed into the fibers as a subtle mark of authenticity. This watermark was supposed to sit upright, a silent guardian against forgery. But in a handful of sheets, something quietly went awry. The crown, meant to stand tall, was pressed upside down. This wasn't a flaw you could spot with the naked eye. The watermark's delicate pattern disappears into the creamy paper until it's exposed to strong transmitted light. Collectors learned to place the stamp face down on a light box, watching as the hidden crown and cross emerged like a ghost. Only then does the inversion reveal itself, the royal symbol unmistakably reversed, its cross pointing down instead of up. No ordinary handling, no glance in daylight would betray the error. It took a practiced eye, a backlight, and the patience to check each stamp individually, one after another, in hopes of finding the rare upside-down king. Modern detection relies on the same principle. Under a light box or a focused beam, the watermark's orientation becomes clear, its position mapped against the engraved design. Magnification, often at 10 to 30 times, confirms what the unaided eye cannot see. This is why the error slipped through the postal system, hiding for decades in plain sight, waiting for someone to discover its secret. As one senior curator at the British Postal Museum and Archive put it, the real drama of the Seahorse isn't in its image, but in the fibers of its paper, where the king, for once, stands on his head. Inside the De La Rue press room, the difference between perfection and error came down to a single, almost mechanical act: how the paper was loaded before printing. During the World War I years, Seasoned operators were called up for military service, and temporary staff filled their places, so even routine procedures became vulnerable to mistake. The press logs from 1916 point to one such lapse on press 57, a machine assigned to the high-value Seahorse run. Operator initials in the ledger, J. Morrison, working the day shift, appear beside batch D19, a shipment of watermark embedded paper. Foreman notes from October 12th record the exact moment. Feed error number 7. Paper batch D19, watermark upside down, Carter. In practical terms, the error happened when a stack of pre-watermarked paper was inserted face up instead of face down. The watermark, a crown and cross pressed into the paper by the supplier, was meant to align upright with the stamp design. But a reverse load meant every stamp from that stack would carry the royal symbol inverted, hidden in the fibers. No alarm sounded. The press ran its cycle, impression after impression, as the upside-down watermark quietly entered the postal world. The incident was noted in the ledger, but not immediately corrected, and only after several runs did the foreman adjust the feed rollers and record the fix. The batch, already printed, joined the others, its flaw invisible to all but the most meticulous future collector. The ledger entry remains, a thin line of ink tying a mechanical slip to one of philately's rarest treasures. At the height of the Seahorse stamp's production, the Royal Mail's workflow moved with the speed and confidence of a well-oiled machine. Once printed, sheets passed straight from the intaglio presses to drying racks, then on to cutting and bundling for dispatch. Inspectors checked for obvious flaws, misprints, missing colors, torn paper, but the watermark, buried deep within the fibers and visible only under strong transmitted light, escaped attention. There was no standard procedure to examine watermark orientation before stamps entered circulation. The error, invisible to the naked eye, simply traveled unnoticed through every checkpoint. Parcels and registered letters, often bearing the high-value Seahorse, were sorted and handled by postal clerks focused on speed and accuracy, not on the subtleties of paper grain or hidden patterns. Stamps were canceled, torn from envelopes, and discarded as routine. For months, perhaps years, the upside-down watermark moved through the postal system, spent and forgotten. Most examples vanished into the ordinary churn of commerce, their secret never revealed. It wasn't until after the fact that Royal Mail introduced a corrective measure. An internal memo dated spring 1917 ordered press operators to check watermark orientation before each run, a simple guide taped above the feed trays. But by then, the damage was done. The vast majority of inverted watermark stamps had already fulfilled their purpose, sent, canceled, and lost to history. Only a handful, set aside by chance or overlooked in dealer stock, would survive to tell the story of the upside-down king. Only 4 mint blocks of the inverted watermark Seahorse are known to exist, each with a documented trail that begins at the De La Rue presses and winds through decades of careful hands. Auction catalogs and museum accession logs form the backbone of this survival ledger. Block A, a 2-shilling 6-pence brown, surfaced in the 1950s in the tray of dealer H. Clark and was later sold at Sotheby's in 1978, where it entered a private UK collection. Block B now resides in the British Postal Museum and Archive, traced from a Royal Philatelic Society archive find in 1962 to its accession in 1994. Block C traveled across the Atlantic, passing through a New York dealer in the 1990s before being acquired by a U.S. collector at a 2005 David Feldman auction. Block D, once held by a London stamp dealer in the 1920s, was auctioned at Spink in 1983 and is now part of a German private collection. Each block's uninterrupted custody, recorded in sale ledgers and institutional records, stands as proof of just how few survived. The rest, used, lost, or destroyed, exist only as a footnote in the archive, leaving these four as the sole witnesses to the error's passage through time. Beneath the glare of auction spotlights, the certified Seahorse block faced a level of scrutiny few artifacts endure. The block's journey from press room mishap to seven-figure treasure hinged on more than reputation. It was the science behind its authentication that commanded the room's attention. Laboratory reports from the British Postal Museum and Archive confirmed the watermark's orientation with scanning electron microscopy, while X-ray fluorescence analysis at the Royal Philatelic Society. London matched the ink's elemental signature to known 1929 Seahorse issues. Laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, performed by independent specialists, mapped the paper's calcium and potassium profile, aligning it precisely with De La Rue's original batch. The watermark's relief, captured through digital focus stacking, left no doubt. This was not a clever forgery, but a genuine survivor of an invisible error. When the hammer fell at just over $1.02 million, the sale set a new benchmark for British philatelic rarities. The auction house's statement was unambiguous. Scientific proof had driven the price as much as the legend itself, anchoring the block's value in both history and hard evidence. Today, a single misaligned sheet can mean $1 million difference. As collectors chase ever subtler details, the hunt for errors like this grows only more intense. In a world of mass production, it's the rare imperfection that redefines value and turns history on its head. What would you treasure?